The rope was chafing, biting into the raw skin of his neck with every desperate, futile tug. He didn't understand why. Why the familiar hands that once offered food, however sporadically, had secured this harsh tether to the rusted fence post in this desolate, unfamiliar place. Why the car door had slammed shut, the engine roared, and the world as he knew it vanished down a dusty, unpaved track, leaving him utterly alone. He was found here, days later, not by the person who left him, but by chance. He was tied up and abandoned, a prisoner tethered to a post in the middle of nowhere, left to face the elements, starvation, thirst, and the crushing weight of betrayal entirely on his own. His initial confusion and frantic hope had long since curdled into a profound, soul-deep despair, a state reflected in his hollow eyes and the defeated slump of his emaciated body against the unforgiving metal fence. He was a lanky hound mix, perhaps 2 or 3 years old, whose life, it seemed, had offered little kindness even before this final act of cruelty. His ribs stretched prominently beneath a dull, dirty coat infested with ticks. His hip bones jutted sharply. Dehydration had left his nose dry and cracked, his eyes sunken. The area around the thick, dirty rope encircling his neck was rubbed raw, inflamed, and beginning to ooze, a painful testament to his initial panicked struggles against the restraint before exhaustion and hopelessness set in. He had paced the small circle permitted by the rope until the ground beneath was bare and compacted. Now he mostly lay still, conserving precious energy, occasionally lifting his head weakly at the sound of a distant bird or the scuttling of unseen creatures in the overgrown weeds nearby, but mostly staring blankly at the indifferent horizon. Flies buzzed relentlessly around his raw neck and the meager waste he'd produced. He was trapped, exposed, starving, thirsty, and utterly abandoned in a state of complete despair. His discovery was pure serendipity. A land surveyor, Ben Carter, was working on mapping the boundaries of the large, undeveloped parcel of land adjacent to the neglected track. Following his GPS coordinates through the tall, dry grass, he heard a faint, almost imperceptible whimper carried on the breeze. Thinking it might be a trapped coyote or other wildlife, he cautiously investigated, pushing aside thick brush, and then he saw him. The sight stopped Ben cold. The dog, tied up to the fence post, skeletal, head hanging low, the raw, angry skin visible around the rope. It wasn't just neglect. It was intentional, prolonged cruelty. Ben felt a surge of immediate anger, followed by a wave of profound sadness. How long had this poor creature been here? Days? A week? How could anyone do this? Hey boy, Ben said softly, his voice thick with emotion, as he slowly approached, careful not to startle the dog further. The dog flinched weakly at the sound of his voice, pressing himself lower to the ground, eyes wide with fear. He made no attempt to growl or bark, seemingly too weak and defeated even for defensive measures. Ben could see the utter hopelessness, the deep despair etched into his posture. He knew he had to act quickly, but carefully. He offered water from his own canteen in a collapsible bowl he carried, holding it out tentatively. The dog watched the bowl with desperate intensity, but was too scared, or perhaps too weak, to lift his head fully or approach Ben's outstretched hand. Ben realized he couldn't safely remove the rope himself without potentially hurting the dog or causing him to panic. He carefully backed away, speaking soothingly, promising to return, and immediately called the county's animal control dispatch, explaining the situation and the dog's critical condition. emphasizing the need for bolt cutters for the rope and immediate medical attention. He waited nearby, keeping a watchful eye, his surveying work forgotten, his focus entirely on the suffering animal he had found. Animal Control Officer Lisa Ramirez arrived, equipped with rescue tools and a compassionate but no-nonsense demeanor. She assessed the situation quickly, her heart aching at the sight. "Okay, buddy," she murmured to the dog as she approached slowly, bolt cutters in hand. "Let's get this horrible thing off you." The dog trembled violently as she neared, squeezing his eyes shut, clearly terrified of the impending interaction, likely associating human approach near his neck with the initial act of being tied up. Lisa worked swiftly and efficiently, shielding the dog's skin as best she could while snipping through the thick, dirty rope. The moment the tension released, the dog didn't bound away. He remained collapsed, seemingly unaware that the physical restraint was gone, the psychological tether of fear and despair still holding him firmly in place. Lisa gently offered him water again, which he weakly lapped this time, his thirst momentarily overriding his fear now that the immediate threat near his neck had passed. Getting him into the transport kennel required immense gentleness. He flinched at every touch, but allowed himself to be lifted, his body terrifyingly light beneath her hands. He was rushed to the county shelter's veterinary clinic for immediate assessment and care. They decided to call him Hitch, a poignant reminder of how he was found. The vet check confirmed severe malnutrition, dehydration, heat exhaustion, a deeply infected wound around his neck from the rope burn, a heavy parasite load, and profound lethargy. He was started immediately on IV fluids, antibiotics, pain medication, and treatments for fleas and ticks. The infected wound on his neck required careful cleaning and bandaging. Blood work revealed anemia and low protein levels consistent with prolonged starvation. While his physical condition was critical, the vet noted that his emotional state was equally concerning. He was deeply shut down, unresponsive, showing classic signs of learned helplessness often seen in animals subjected to inescapable confinement and abandonment. His journey back, if he survived physically, would need to address these deep psychological wounds. Hitch spent the first week in the shelter's medical ward. He slowly began to recover physically, responding to fluids and nutrition. The infection in his neck began to subside with treatment, though the raw skin took time to heal. He started eating soft food, offered gently, though he remained extremely wary of human presence, often eating only when left completely alone. He tolerated necessary handling for medical care, but showed no positive response, remaining tense and withdrawn, his eyes reflecting that deep, lingering despair. The shelter environment, with its noise and unfamiliarity, clearly stressed him, likely triggering memories of his terrifying ordeal. Recognizing that Hitch needed a quieter, more focused environment to begin healing emotionally, the shelter manager reached out to Second Start Rescue, an organization specializing in rehabilitating dogs with trauma histories. A foster home was needed desperately, one with experience handling profound fear and shutdown cases, particularly those involving the trauma of severe confinement or tethering. Enter Maggie. Maggie was a volunteer foster parent for Second Start, known for her quiet patience and her success with dogs others found challenging. She had a calm, predictable home environment and understood the slow, painstaking process required to rebuild trust in a dog as deeply wounded as Hitch. Hearing his story, found tied up and abandoned, left to die, touched her deeply. She immediately agreed to take him in, knowing it would be a long and difficult journey. The transition to Maggie's home was managed carefully. Hitch arrived, anxious and overwhelmed, immediately retreating to the covered crate set up in a quiet corner of Maggie's living room. Maggie followed the established protocol, minimal interaction initially, allowing him days to decompress, providing food and water reliably, and maintaining a calm, quiet atmosphere. She spent time simply being present in the same room, working on her computer or reading, letting Hitch observe her from the safety of his crate, learning her routines, associating her presence with peace rather than threat. Progress was measured in tiny, almost imperceptible steps. After several days, Hitch started poking his head out of the crate when Maggie entered the room, sniffing the air cautiously. Maggie began leaving a trail of high-value treats leading a short distance from his crate, allowing him to find them when he felt brave enough. Weeks passed. Hitch gradually started spending more time outside his crate, usually lying on a soft bed nearby, watching Maggie intently but still maintaining a safe distance. He remained incredibly fearful of any sudden movements, loud noises, or direct approaches. The specific trauma of being tied up manifested in a profound fear of anything around his neck or any feeling of restraint. Collars were out of the question initially. Even seeing a leash caused him to tremble and retreat. Maggie knew addressing this would be crucial for his rehabilitation, but couldn't be rushed. She started by simply leaving a soft harness lying near his food bowl for days, associating it with positive experiences. Then she held the harness while offering him treats from a distance. Slowly, over many weeks, using positive reinforcement and desensitization techniques, she worked towards him, tolerating the harness being touched to his back, then briefly draped over him, then finally clipped shut for mere seconds, always paired with high-value rewards and immediate release. It was an exercise in extreme patience, celebrating every tiny step forward. Similarly, building tolerance for gentle touch required months. Maggie started by offering her hand, palm down and still, for Hitch to sniff voluntarily. She rewarded any approach, any sniff, any sign of relaxation near her hand. She eventually progressed to touching his shoulder or flank, very briefly and lightly, while he ate a treat, always watching his body language for signs of stress and respecting his boundaries implicitly. The goal wasn't just tolerance, but replacing the old association of human touch with a new one: safety, gentleness, reward. The journey away from despair began subtly. It wasn't a sudden epiphany, but a gradual dawning. Hitch started anticipating his mealtimes with a faint flicker of interest in his eyes. He began following Maggie cautiously around the house at a distance, his curiosity slowly outweighing his fear. He discovered the simple comfort of a truly soft, warm bed, sighing deeply as he settled into it, a stark contrast to the hard ground he'd known. He learned the predictable rhythm of Maggie's quiet life, finding security in the routine. The first unmistakable sign of emerging joy, a true step towards delight, happened during a quiet evening about 4 months into his foster care. Maggie was sitting on the floor, softly tossing a very soft, silent plush toy for herself, not expecting Hitch to engage. Hitch watched her intently from his bed across the room. Then, tentatively, he stood up, walked slowly towards the toy after Maggie tossed it gently near him, nudged it with his nose, picked it up awkwardly, and carried it back to his bed, tail giving a single, hesitant wag. Maggie felt tears prick her eyes. It was the first spontaneous display of playfulness, the first hint of a dog rediscovering, or perhaps discovering for the first time, the simple joy of a toy. More moments of delight followed, each one precious. The first time he solicited affection, gently nudging Maggie's hand for pets. The first time he truly relaxed beside her on the sofa, leaning his weight against her without tension. The first time he greeted her return home not with fear, but with a soft whine and a wiggly body, tail wagging more confidently. The first time he ran, albeit slightly awkwardly, due to his previous emaciation, chasing a leaf blown across the secure backyard, a moment of pure, unadulterated canine joy. He was learning that leashes meant walks in interesting places, not being tied up and left to die. He was learning that human hands could offer comfort and play, not just restraint and abandonment. The deep despair was finally lifting, replaced by a blossoming sense of security and happiness. Finding Hitch, his forever home, required finding adopters who understood the significance of his journey, the lingering shadows of his trauma, and the depth of his gentle, resilient spirit. Second Start Rescue found that perfect match in a retired couple, Frank and Carol, who lived a quiet life and had experience with fearful rescue hounds. They were captivated by Hitch's story and charmed by his sweet, sensitive nature during their careful, multi-visit introduction process. They understood his need for patience and a predictable environment. Today, Hitch lives a life filled with the quiet delight he was so cruelly denied. He has soft beds in multiple rooms, nutritious meals delivered reliably, gentle walks in peaceful surroundings, and the constant loving companionship of Frank and Carol. He still bears the faint scar around his neck, a physical reminder of being found tied up and abandoned. But the haunted look of despair in his eyes has been completely replaced by the soft glow of contentment and trust. His incredible journey serves as a powerful testament to the resilience of animals, the profound impact of patient rescue and rehabilitation, and the possibility of finding true joy even after experiencing the depths of human cruelty and abandonment. He is living proof that a second chance can indeed lead to a life filled with unexpected delight.